Hi, welcome to the Nocturnal Space Workshop. I'm Trej and this is Iris. Unlike you and me, Iris has no interest in Dungeons and Dragons or models. Unlike you and me, she has zero interest in Dungeons and Dragons or models and stuff. She's only interested in topics such as survival and companionship. Me, on the other hand, I love D&D and role-playing games in general. I think they're awesome. So when a buddy of mine said he was starting up a new D&D campaign, I jumped at the chance to join in. In the past I've played con artists, assassins, noblemen, thieves, soldiers. This time around I don't want to be the guy with a big sword that charges into battle. I want to heal others and cause distractions using tricks and magic, that sort of thing. So, if I'm playing in a fantasy game with in a fantasy world, I want to play a fantasy character. I don't want to be a boring old human like I see in the office every day. So this time around I'm going to be playing a Tiefling bard. Now, we don't use miniatures in our group, theatre of the mind and all that, we don't use models, but I got a little bit carried away thinking about the character and I wanted to make a model regardless. I just couldn't find the right miniature, you know? So I started looking at different models that I could chop up to convert or kit bash. I just couldn't find one of the right parts. Well, I could find one or two bits, but it quickly became apparent I was going to have to do a lot of scratch building for this. Oh, this isn't going to be just some random mini that's part of a larger army, this is going to be my character, you know? So I decided to make my own, from scratch. Look who it is, Iris. Look. No? Okay. Oh, let's pop you down then. Oh. I'll explain more about my in-game character creation as I go, but for the model I started off drawing a picture to get a feel for the character. When it comes to faces I find it easier to copy a real one, so I thought I'd use this old photo of my granddad as a starting point. Look how young and cute Gran and Grandpa look here. Not to copy his face exactly, just to get an idea of where his features sit, the unique proportions of his face, the cheeky little smirk he had, the hooded piercing eyes. So I went to get comfy on the sofa to start sketching without any distractions. After all, drawing takes a great deal of focus and concentration. Hello. There. This is why I have to work out in the workshop. I like to start with a sketch because I like to find the character first, rather than just playing myself in the game world. I do a sketch and see what stands out, what I like or dislike. I let the drawing inform the character instead of me designing it. This picture started out based on the face of my granddad, but I wasn't trying to copy his features precisely. It's a bit rubbish, but this is just a concept sketch and the drawing evolved as I went. I did accidentally leave a big gap over one side of the page, but I thought I could use this space to note key abilities and write the character name, Elweiss, like Hellwise, because he's got demon blood. Get it? I went to fill up my water pot before painting and I accidentally kicked a tripod leg and I only just caught the camera before it smashed. So here's a tour of the workshop. Here's my workstation, here's the wall where I keep my paints, here's another wall, and there's my paintbrushes and paints again, some kitchen paper and supplies, wire, tub of junk, the mirrors for extra light when I'm filming. Under the counter I keep tools and green stuff. I did manage to put the water pot down safely though. I used gouache paint at first as it gives a really rich, vibrant colour, and that's basically the only difference between gouache and watercolours, unless you're an expert. I'm not an expert though, so that's all I've got to tell you on that. As a magical creature I wanted him to have colourful skin and hair. My favourite colours are teal and turquoise shades of blue and green, or purple and magenta, so I knew I wanted that to be my palette, using magenta as a spot colour for the eyes and horns. Once the paint had dried, I weighted it down to press the pages flat. I'd filled in the background and stuff and was rubbing out the pencil. I had a thought to go over the lines with ink pens, but then I decided it looked a bit rubbish, like Ryan Reynolds had f***ed a White Walker from Game of Thrones. So I started again. This time I wanted to get more of his body in and show him in a non-threatening pose. I'm not much of a power gamer. We all have that player in the group that scours the rulebook to take advantage of every loophole, or to stack stats and get the highest modifier possible in combat. There's nothing wrong with that style of play, but I love D&D as a communal storytelling experience. So when I design a character, I always think of it more from the story side than what's going to give me an advantage in the game. I I used these brush pens that my wife got me from her birthday to add a bit of shading and to outline it. This is what I used to make the artwork for my intro sequence at the beginning of my videos with the little red shed. I went over some areas with a wet brush to blend the colours and gave the leather armour a wash with watered down brown paint to darken it. I also used a bit of that on the background to make it look like he's in a clothes shop trying on outfits. Inspired, I decided to sit down with the player's handbook and look at character creation. Elweiss will be an inviting host. He's a showman and everyone's welcome to the show. He's not going out to fight, he'll try to avoid fighting if he can. I decided to boost his charisma, which he uses for magic and performance, and made his strength his lowest stat. But I didn't like this picture either. I made it too neat and mundane. This isn't a showman, he's a member of the audience. So I binned this too and started again. I went the opposite direction this time and tried to capture his character. I did like the friendly open-armed posture, so I kept that and made his hair wild and messy this time round, and I just ran with it, following the drawing naturally instead of trying to plan it too much. Somewhere along the way I discovered that a crescent moon belt buckle was really important, so I made sure to include that. Then I coloured it with the brush pens first this time, followed by watercolours. Bards are spellcasters, and I gave him mostly healing spells with prestidigitation to aid his performances. A proficiency in history seemed fitting from the songs of heroes of old. Born to human parents, he grew up the only tiefling in the village, and he was ostracised by the other kids. Even his own father abandoned him, and he was raised by his mother alone. She loved him and always defended him. She was his hero, his champion. He loved her with his whole heart. I think maybe she was a wild, spirited young woman, and maybe he got part of that from her. I wanted to capture some of that wild nature, allowing the pigment to run where it may. Maybe I went a little bit too messy with that picture, but I feel I have his character down now. Time for one last drawing. Bear with me, I promise I'll make it quick. I kept a friendly open posture and messy hair. He's untamed, open, honest. Elweiss doesn't come at you brandishing a weapon or wearing armour. Combat's inevitable in D&D, but Elweiss doesn't appear as a threat because he doesn't try to be threatening. He's exposed, vulnerable. Sleeves rolled up, bare arms, not bearing arms. Even the leather armour, I wanted it to be more like a matador's jacket. It's a costume to look the part. It's for the show, not for protection. People pushed him away his entire life, and he just wants to be part of a community. He was performing as a way to be accepted, to be loved. He's a friend to all. But that's also disarming, and he can use that to his advantage. When everyone underestimates you, you can do the unexpected. And sometimes, the bullied becomes the bully. I gave him vicious mockery to show that he hurts people with words. When pushed to actually fight, and he does need to be pushed, he drops the friendly disposition, like a cat that allows you to stroke it but turns when provoked to claw your face without hesitation. Now I feel like I know the character. I know what Elweiss looks like and how he acts. I'm going to make a wire armature, then build up the model with green stuff for a 2-part modelling putty. First I put some masking tape onto the base so the green stuff doesn't stick to it. I'll be making a separate base later. I didn't measure anything as I tend to just eyeball things, but I made a basic body shape using some 28mm minis as rough comparison. These are from Ironclad Miniatures, a Victorian sci-fi range. I love their minis, they have so much character. Shame I didn't get a proper close-up, but you should definitely check them out. I know a lot of people are switching to 3D printed stuff, but they look artificial to me. I like miniatures where you can see the sculptor's work in the model, overcoming assembly and moulding restrictions. I like how every nose is handmade and unique, you know, like a real person. 3D printed stuff, it's too copy and paste for me. Very neat and precise details, but no individual characters. The noses are all selected from preset files. They look good on Instagram, sure, but this scale, in real life and on the gaming table, all that detail, it just becomes texture. But you collect the minis that you like. This model is not designed to be cast and moulded, so I don't need to worry about those restrictions. The workshop's freezing this time of year and the green stuff took longer than normal to get going. If you haven't used it before, just mix the blue and yellow together to get green and it slowly firms up, eventually setting like plastic. Keep it wet to stop sticking to your tools. I did that to start with, and then I started using petroleum jelly, or dinosaur oil as I like to call it. When working with green stuff I normally do it in stages, working on one area then letting it set completely before moving on to another part. This stops you accidentally squishing the bit you've just spent ages sculpting and getting fingerprints all over it. I decided to break it up into making a basic frame or body shape, then bulk him up with layers, adding clothing and detail. I left wire sticking out of his hands for where the daggers are going to go. He's going to be in a semi-combat pose, like he's ready to defend himself but really would prefer not to be fighting. Ideally, you want to leave 24 hours to set between each stage, so the following footage is spread over a good couple of weeks. Remember, this is my hobby, so that's around working my actual day job and, doing general grown-upping. Unfortunately, green stuff likes to stick to everything except other bits of green stuff, so I found the layering method didn't really work. Next time I think I'll go from the ground up, start with the feet and then legs and go up from there. As I edit and record this voiceover, we've actually started to play and had a few gaming sessions. I took Vicious Mockery as it seemed fitting for someone used to putting hecklers in their place, but it turns out it's a really powerful cantrip to have. If you don't know, you can cast cantrips without spending your spell slots, so you can insult people to death all day long and not break a sweat. I could see it argued it's slightly overpowered, but remember the bard's not a fighter, so having this as an option in combat is a huge benefit. I also gave him Tasha's Hideous Laughter spell, which is like those scenes in films and TV shows where somebody leaves laughing gas on and everyone falls around giggling. The target of the spell is incapacitated with laughter, allowing you to run away. Well, I ran away. My fellow players went for the easy kill and stabbed them as they rolled around in hysterics and then blood pooled around them. It was horrible really. Both of these spells are also part of that whole bullied becoming the bully. I don't think he really likes using them. I decided Elweiss wouldn't feel comfortable making people feel helpless like that, so I'm only going to use that as a last resort in the future. When his mother died, he was helpless to save her, and that's something that's always stuck with him, being helpless, not being able to help someone he loved. Inspired by the stories of heroes of old in the songs he sings, and with no more ties to the village where he grew up, he went travelling to see if there was some way he could make a difference, to help others and find a community, to find family. He started his adventuring career travelling with my wife's character, an elf ranger named Nomari, which means good fortune in the elven tongue. She'd help guide people out in the wilderness, and he'd learn their stories and entertain them along the way. Later, they met the rest of the group, an elvish shield maiden named Priya, who also came from an entertainment background, but unlike Elweiss, she focused on training for combat and kicking ass. There's a cleric Camaris from a long line of Camarises. The player in question has been using the same name for every D&D character he's played since the 90s. The cleric Camaris Camarison brought Holy Might to the troop, and Thalgrim, the headstrong dwarf, brought his axe and crossbow also. I showed Amelia, my wife, how the model was coming along, and she described her character Nomari, the Elven Ranger. Amelia loves Lord of the Rings, and says Nomari is a cross between Aragorn and Arwen, beautiful, elegant, majestic, yet grounded and wild, at one with nature and practical. Maybe I'll make a miniature of her one day. In the first gaming session we had, 2 of our players couldn't make it, the 2 elves, Nomari and Priya, so it was just Elweiss, Camaris the cleric, and Thalgrim the dwarf. The adventure had already been planned for all 5 of us though, so it was safe to say we got our asses handed to us. In the campaign we're playing, the DM has set it a couple of hundred years after the normal timeline. Magical creatures have withdrawn into their own communities. They're still there, just not as common. We began in a small town southwest of the free city of Greyhawk. It used to go by the name of Safeton. Now, it went by the name of Toppleton. We were in the Wandering Goose Tavern, celebrating a successful adventure that our characters had just returned from. This was because the DM wanted us to start as an existing group that are already working together. He explained the elves' absence, as them partaking in some elvish day of celebration, something like that, some ritual of great importance to the elves. We were all just getting drunk. Elweiss had joined some of the local musicians on stage, and they were playing some old favourites when a young girl came running in. Our characters recognised her as Petra, the sister of Pierce the Hunter and Town Tanner. She told the group that her brother had been attacked by bandits in the nearby woods, and they'd carried him off. The DM had set us up as an existing group of adventurers, celebrating a victory, heroes of the town. How could we say no to a young girl in distress? So of course we agreed to investigate. We didn't need to wait for the elves. What could possibly go wrong, right? This is where the DM had either underestimated the strength of the upcoming bandits, overestimated our own character abilities, or underestimated our stupidity as players. We went to the woods where Petra had said she last saw Pierce. It was nighttime and quite dark by this point, but luckily Elweiss and Thalgrim had dark vision. Unfortunately, Camaris the cleric didn't realise this and cast a light spell, dazzling his companions. Staggering further into the woods, Elweiss spotted something between the trees, light reflecting in the eyes of a group of approaching goblins. He sounded the alarm and the goblins' ambush was foiled. Thalgrim the dwarf tried to warn them off, to avoid combat and give them a chance. Elweiss did the same, but applied thaumaturgy to make his voice boom and intimidate the band of goblins. Some of the goblins were intimidated and held back, the rest attacked. This was when I realised how powerful Vicious Mockery is. I only wanted Elweiss to bruise their egos, but instead, he melted their brains. Camaris discovered his holy fireballs were also very effective, whereas Thalgrim wanted to try out his new crossbow. This was our first combat of the game, and we were all confident that our characters could defeat them. Unfortunately, the dice gods disagreed. Thalgrim kept shooting wide with his crossbow. The player knew he would be much more effective swinging his axe, which used his high strength stat, but decided the headstrong dwarf would insist on persevering with the crossbow. Eventually he saw sense, and goblins were soon falling to the ground, cleft in twain. By this point, however, Camarus had been on the wrong end of some pointer sticks, and the player was desperately making death-saving rolls. Yeah, this was still our first gaming session. We were eventually victorious though, and managed to get Camarus the cleric back to the Wandering Goose Tavern where he could heal, although we were battered and bruised and not looking quite so heroic. Back in the real world, we decided to end the session there as a good point to have the elves as rejoin us next time. Unfortunately, Thalgrim's player couldn't make the next session, so the DM explained his absence as him going to find the weaponsmith that sold him the dodgy crossbow. Back to the model though, it's time to paint it, so start with a spray primer. I use the same craft store paint for my miniatures as I do for my sketches. This is acrylic, just water it down and apply many coats. Although watercolour and gouache can be good for washes and weathering effects, I decided not to paint the magenta in his eyes. When you see a person far away in real life, you can't see the whites of their eyes, you only see the shadows in the recesses under their brows. When you see a model on the table, it should be the same. This is another matter of personal taste though. Painted eye details can look fantastic in close-up photography, so if that's your goal then go for it. On the tabletop they look a bit unnatural though, as we're just not used to seeing eye pupils at a distance. Paint your models in a way that makes you happy though. In the game, Camarus was back to full health, and with Namari and Priya back in the group, we were able to muster our efforts and proceed in the search. Did I mention looting the bodies before? If you're a first-time adventurer, lesson number 1 is, always loot the bodies after a battle. We only got a few coppers from the goblins, but it all goes in the coffers and sometimes you find special or magical items. We were back on the trail of the bandits and soon found their camp in the woods as Namari used her tracking skills, and Amelia rolled a 20. The elven ranger stealthily scouted around the encampment and reported a number of armed guards were protecting some prisoners being held in makeshift cages. Pierce the hunter didn't seem to be one of them, but it seemed a reasonable assumption that these were linked to the same group that had snatched him. We quickly formed a plan that Elweiss would create a distraction in the front of the camp to draw the guards away from the cages so the others could free the prisoners. I'd given Elweiss the spell, Disguise Self. I thought that would come in handy as a tiefling in a world where magical creatures were not so common anymore. Combined with the costumes in his entertainer's kit, he disguised himself as an old man and approached the entrance to the camp, pretending to be lost in the woods. Going into full performance mode, he did a pratfall, falling on his backside in the mud, and used thaumaturgy to create phantom sounds to make himself sound flatulent as he stood up. The guards at the entrance were laughing at him and calling the others to come see the foolish old man, giving Camarus, Namari and Priya a chance to free the prisoners. A lot of the artwork in the rulebooks show the world of D&D to be like a Disney film, and the Honour Among Thieves film, which I loved, I thought was fantastic, but it was quite light-hearted and tongue-in-cheek. The world we were playing in was more like Game of Thrones, harsh, grim and dangerous. The leader of the bandits approached Elweiss, believing him to be an old man, and, drawing his sword, said to him, "Why don't you just fuck off?" I realised then this was serious. Anyway, the model's nearly finished now, so you know the drill. Click like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you're interested in D&D ramblings, and maybe I'll update you on how the campaign goes in the future. Or tell me if you'd like to see models of the other characters in Elweiss's group, or, tell me about your own characters. I love reading and chatting about all things D&D. And don't forget to subscribe to any other D&D or crafty channels in the comments. The Dungeons and Dragons and Maker communities go hand in hand together, and they really are great to be part of, so, we should all be friends. Here's the gallery.